students, welcome to Narayana IS. Students, as part of our daily news analysis, we shall be discussing 5 important topics from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Now, going through these topics will help you understand various topics which will be important for the UPSC examination. So, the 5 topics that we shall be discussing is the first topic, war of attrition. Now, this article talks at how the Naxalites, despite losing its influence in the political and the security landscape, are still posing a significant threat to our security forces, and what the government has to do in order to completely eliminate the menace of Naxalism. This is the first topic that we shall be discussing. The second topic talks about South China Sea. The article talks at how India was a passive player initially with respect to South China Sea, but now India is engaging more and more in the South China Sea. Reason? Why? Because China is posing a threat to India in the Indo-Pacific region or in the Indian Ocean region, and so as to counter China, we are posing a threat, or we are in a way engaging with the Southeast Asian partners so as to counter China in the South China Sea. This is the second article that we shall be discussing. The third article that we shall be discussing is Iran's nuclear policy. Now, we know that Iran and Israel are engaged in battle. Now, what if Israel attacks Iran? In case Israel attacks Iran, Iran might use nuclear weapons. So, what would be repercussions if Iran would use nuclear weapons, or how Iran would review its nuclear policy is the article discusses. The fourth article that we shall be discussing is about the LGBTQ community. Now, the article talks that how the LGBTQ community faces challenge, despite the fact that Section 377 was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. How the LGBTQ community are facing challenges, injustices, and what the government can do in order to overcome the challenges that the LGBTQ community are facing. This is the fourth topic. And the fifth topic talks about the National Framework for Early Child Stimulation. Now, this framework states that the learning begins in the children right at the birth stage, and so the government is planning to inculcate or train the anganwadis staff, the parents, at the same time ASHA workers, so that necessary skills can be imparted in the children to achieve key milestones. So, these are the 5 topics that we shall be discussing, and finally in the end we shall be discussing few practice questions which will help you to understand the type of questions asked in the UPSC examination, right? So, let's get started. Students, the first topic, war of attrition. Why it is important for the UPSC examination? Because the UPSC can ask a question on Naxalism or Maoism, right? So, this topic falls under GS paper 3. In GS paper 3, we have a subject in the name internal security. Under internal security, we have a subtopic in the name role of external and non-state actors in creating challenges to internal security, and Naxalites are the non-state actors, right? So, let's get started. So, again, you can see or experience such type of questions in the UPSC examination. What are the determinants of left-wing extremism in eastern part of India, that is the region of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, etc.? What strategy should the government of India, civil administration and the security forces adopt to counter the threat in the affected areas? So, such type of questions can be expected in the UPSC examination. The context. Now, as we discussed, students, that the article talks that despite the influence of Naxalism going down in the recent years, the Naxalites still pose a significant amount of threat to the security forces, right? So, the recent actions by the paramilitary and police forces have dealt a severe blow to the Maoists, but despite the security forces fighting or sort of eliminating the Naxalites time and again have emerged as a significant threat to the security forces. That's the reason the name of the article, War of Attrition, continues. So, before we understand this article, it is very important to understand the phenomenon of Naxalism. So, what is Naxalism? Now, Naxalism is an ideology, right? This name Naxalism was derived from a word Naxal. Now, the word Naxal was derived from a village Naxalbari. Why Naxalbari? Because Naxalbari is a village in the Darjeeling district of West Bengal. Now, this was a district where the Naxalism phenomena began, right? Under the leadership of Charu Mazumdar and Kanu Sanya, right? So, who are Naxalites? Naxalites are far left radical communists. Now, Naxalites are those who derive their teachings or who derive their political ideology from the teachings of Mao Zedong. Who was Mao Zedong? He was a Chinese revolutionary leader. Now, far left radical communists. Now, who are the far left radical communists? They are those people who try to establish equality in the society, who are fighting against the capitalists. They believe that it is because of the capitalist class that there is inequality prevailing in the society. Far left radical, which means they adopt violent means to fight against the capitalists, right? The ideological basis for these violent movements, for example, Mao Zedong using the communism ideology, he brought a revolution in China and eliminated or defeated the Qing dynasty in China, right? So, the ideological basis support for the violent movement was provided by the writings of Marx and Engels, which means Mao Zedong, Vladimir Lenin were influenced by the writings of Marx and Engels. The leftist ideologies, right? They believe that all the existing social relations and the state structures in a capitalist society are exploitative in nature. They're exploitative in nature, which means the situation is exploitative in nature. Why? Because the situation or the structure has been devised by the capitalist class. And the leftist ideologies believe that if this has to change, this can be changed only through a revolution. Revolution through violent means. So, Maoism. So, this ideology was given by Karl Marx, right? Then Mao Zedong, right? He taught how to capture the state power. So, the likes of Mao Zedong and Vladimir Lenin, right? So, they taught how to capture state power. For example, Mao Zedong, he taught how to capture state power through combination of armed insurgency, mass mobilization and strategic alliances. Mao called this process as protracted people's war, which means it's a long battle. Now, based on how Mao fought in China, the Naxalites, the tribals of a country living in Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, the hardcore tribals take the influence, or are inspired by how Mao fought in China or Lenin fought in Russia, and they are trying to adopt the same means to fight against the state in our country so that they can establish their own government. I hope you have understood what is Naxalism. So, evolution of Naxalism in India. Now, Naxalism emerged in the late 1960s in the village Naxalbari, right? Various factions rose, right? But in the year 2004, various factions, they came together, they merged, and then the result was CPI Maoist, right? Now, once all the factions merged into CPI Maoist, it strengthened their organizational structure and operational capabilities. Now, students, the Naxalites, they often thrive in the underdeveloped regions, such regions which are marked by poverty and governance failures. So, I hope you know that in India was a developing country, or India was a poor country until the late 90s, right? So, as India was a poor country, many areas were neglected by the government. Now, wherever these areas or the areas which were neglected by the government, the hardcore Naxalites, they established safe sanctuary or safe haven in those places. So often the Naxalites, they thrive in the underdeveloped regions. Again, the conflict intensified into a protracted struggle, a long battle between the Naxalites and the state forces. Now, despite setbacks, the Naxalism persists. Why? The Naxalites are able to survive. Why? Because they adapt to the changing situations. So, this is how the Naxalism evolved in our country. It is very important to understand the reasons behind the growth of Naxalism in our country. So, let's try to understand that. The first is the Jal, Jungle, Zamin issues. Now, students, the tribals, Naxalites are the hardcore tribals, right? So, not every tribal is a Naxalite. So, the tribals have a natural coexistential relationship with the forest, which means they have been living in the forest since centuries. But the modern legislations, for example, the Forest Act of 27, the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. So these modern legislations have taken away their source of livelihood of the tribals. Now, as the source of livelihood was taken away, it was not replaced with the fruits of development. And this resulted in the feeling of hopelessness, desperation, etc. So this is the first factor. Second is the economic issues. Now, poverty, unemployment, and lack of education, they continue to be portrayed as fundamental drivers of extremism. Students, poverty, unemployment, it creates a feeling of hopelessness. It creates a feeling of desperation. People feel that they are deprived. Why? Because they are not able to access the basic minimal facilities. And lack of economic opportunities, which means you don't have many opportunities to do something in your life. Now, if the economic opportunities are not available, then the youth will be attracted towards the lure of extremist ideas. So this is how when people are unemployed, right, they fall into the trap of the hardcore people, or so to say the terrorists, right? So this is one issue in the tribal regions of our country, where because of unemployment, because of poverty, these people fell into the trap of hardcore Naxalites. This is the second issue. Third, political issues. Now, political issue can also play an indirect role to the spread of Naxalism. Now, places where human rights and democratic values are not respected, right, the youth are expected to take a violent path. Extremism also flourishes when the political rights and civil liberties are not practiced. Civic liberties, for example, we have freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of press. Then political rights, having free and fair elections, having the right to contest in the elections, having the right to vote in the elections. So if these rights are not given to people, it is said that people might opt the path of violent means. Third issue. Fourth, now the areas where Naxalism is thriving are those areas which were ignored by the government. Governance deficit, which means poorly governed places. The areas which are ignored by the people, the hardcore Naxalites would try to take advantage. How? They'll establish their safe sanctuary, safe haven in those areas which are ignored by the government. They help the poor tribals, they win the support of the people, and this is how they expand or spread their ideology. So these are some of the reasons, factors responsible for the rise and spread of left-wing extremism. When we say that these areas were deprived of development, which means these areas did not have educational facilities, then basic healthcare facilities, infrastructure, law and order, routine administration, mismanagement and corruption, poor implementation of special laws like we have the Panchayat extension to scheduled areas, fifth schedule. So these legislations or these policies which are framed by the government to protect the rights of the tribals were violated by the government or by the officials, which led to the feeling of deprivation, high-handedness of the local administration. So these all reasons contributed to the growth and spread of Naxalism. And how did the government react? First of all, the government banned the CPI Maoists under UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. The government realized that just focusing on hard means is not going to be sufficient, which means the government of India has to use hard means as well as soft means, right? Hard diplomacy as well as soft diplomacy. That's the reason the government of India came up with National Policy and Action Plan, wherein they adopted four-pronged strategy in the areas of security, development, ensuring rights and entitlement of local communities, which means empowering the tribals, and management of public perception. Then, the government of India has also worked on the intelligence mechanism. For example, multi-agency centers were set up at the national level, at the same time state level, to share the intelligence with the security forces so that the security forces can deal with the hardcore Naxalites in a very strict manner. Then assistance to left-wing extremist states. For example, states like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Andhra Pradesh. Now students, we know that law and order is a state subject. But the central government has helped these states by deploying security forces. For example, the Central Armed Police Forces. Now, under Operation Green Hunt in 2010, massive security forces were deployed in the regions which were affected because of Naxalism. It is because of this operation in 2010 around 250 districts were affected because of Naxalism, but now it has come down to just 50 districts. Then Roshni scheme. Now, the government of India has understood that just by focusing on the hard means, it's not going to be sufficient. That's the reason the government is also focusing on these soft measures like the Roshni scheme. Now, what is this? This is a placement-linked skill development scheme for the rural and the tribal population, which means the government of India is trying to impart skills among the tribals so that the tribals would be or could be employed so that they can be taken away from the hardcore Naxalites. So this is what the government reacted. Now, in conclusion, students, the government of India, as we discussed, realized that just fighting with guns is not going to solve the purpose or eliminate the problem of Naxalism. That's the reason resolving the conflict requires multifaceted approach, which means the government of India has to ensure that the tribals should be accessible, or the tribals should have the access to all the basic minimum facilities, be it education, be it healthcare, be it the employment opportunities, right? So it is important for the government of India to ensure that the tribal people are empowered. There is no scope for the tribals to have any grievance against the government of India or against the government of state, thereby winning the trust and confidence of the tribal people. I hope students here understood this particular article. Students, the next article is about South China Sea. We'll try to understand India's approach with respect to South China Sea. Again, South China Sea dispute, permanent court of arbitration are the key terms that you need to understand, which is important for the UPSC examination. And this topic can be mapped under GS paper 2 in international relations. Now, again, a question can be asked of this nature. South China Sea has assumed greater geopolitical significance in the present context. Comment. It was asked in the year 2016. Another such question involving South China Sea was also asked in the year 2014. Now, what is the context? The context is that the Philippines and China are contesting over South China Sea. So, China is trying to lay claim over the region which falls under Philippines' exclusive economic zone. So, this is the context. Now, the conflict or the confrontation heightened in the year 2023. Now, in the year 2023, India took the side, or India stood with Philippines. Now, this marks a shift in India's foreign policy. As we discussed, India is a passive player in South China Sea. India is to refrain from taking sides, but now India is asserting herself in this South China Sea by supporting or by taking sides with the countries with whom China has confrontation or China has disputes with. The significance of South China Sea. Now, this is a body of water bordered by several countries in Southeast Asia. Which are these? Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Taiwan. We also have Japan, right? So, the significance of South China Sea. Geopolitically, South China Sea is important. Why? Because it is located or positioned at an important juncture which is important for the international maritime route. It links the Pacific and the Indian Ocean and also serves as a crucial transit point for global shipping and trade. Now again, South China Sea is blessed with abundant resources including fisheries and oil and gas reserves. The sea has also the capability, or it sustains over half of the world's fishing vessels, right? Then the South China Sea has also minerals. For example, we have coral, lime, silicate, sand, gemstones, etc. So this is the importance of South China Sea. Now let us try to understand the dispute involving South China Sea. The dispute involves territorial or the maritime claims and the competing interests between China and other countries in the South China Sea. Which are these countries? China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia and Brunei. Now, China claims sovereignty over most of the South China Sea. China claims that the entire South China Sea belongs to them. Now, China has come up with this imaginary 9-dash line. Now, 9-dash line is an imaginary line through which China claims that the entire South China Sea belongs to them. Now, this imaginary 9-dash line, it overlaps with the exclusive economic zone of the other Southeast Asian countries like Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, etc. Now, the main issues at stake, it includes the control, who is going to control the fishing grounds, the fishing resources, or the other natural resources. Because if the region falls under the under any country or under the territorial region of any country, which means that country would have the right to exploit the resources. But if the region falls under other country, the first country would not be able to exploit the resources. Now, it's not that the countries have not tried to come up with a solution. For example, in 2016, Permanent Court of Arbitration, which is situated in Hague, it ruled the judgment in favor of Philippines. But China refused to accept the judgment, which is leading to more and more confrontation and contest between China and the other countries. Now, there's a body of the Southeast Asian countries known by the name Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. Now, ASEAN have come together to facilitate dialogue and cooperate among the dispute parties. But unfortunately, no comprehensive outcome has emerged out of any such dialogue. And the situation in South China Sea is continuing to evolve with ongoing tensions and occasional incidents, which heightens concerns about the potential escalation between China and the other countries. So, what is India doing? Now, if China can trouble India in the Indian Ocean region, we can also trouble China in China's periphery. And that is exactly what India is trying to do. Now, as part of India's Act East policy, what is Act East policy? Now, under Act East policy, the government of India is envisioning to connect India or India's eastern part with the Southeast Asian countries, which means we are trying to engage more and more with these Southeast Asian countries. For example, there are joint maritime exercise which India conducts with the countries like Philippines, Vietnam, etc. Then again, India is also part of Quad. What is Quad? Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. There are 4 countries which are part of Quad: US, India, Japan, and Australia. All are like-minded countries, democratic countries. All have come together to ensure a maritime or rules-based maritime order. Again, India can also leverage her soft power diplomacy. Why? Because India has historical connections with many countries in these Southeast Asian countries. So, by leveraging the soft power diplomacy, for example, yoga, trade, we can make sure that we build formidable relations with these Southeast Asian countries so that we all can come together and counter China's growing hegemony. So, this is the dispute of South China Sea. I hope students here understood the article or topic. Students, the next topic deals with Iran's nuclear policy. Now, in this article, though the article is political, but there are few key terms that you need to know. One is the International Atomic Energy Agency, NPT, and JCPOA. And this topic can be mapped under International Relations in GS paper 2. Questions can be asked of this nature. In the Indian context, what is the implication of ratifying the additional protocol with the IAEA, right? So, these are the options that you can read. Now, students, we know that Iran and Israel are engaged in battle. Israel attacked Iran in Damascus, and in return, Iran attacked Israel. Now, Iran, or the foreign minister of Iran, states that in case Israel attacks Iran, then Iran can review its nuclear policy. Now, the long-standing assertion of Iran was that the nuclear activities will only be used for peaceful purpose. But given that Iran is facing threat from Israel, and in case Israel attacks Iran, then the foreign minister has mentioned or has said indirectly that Iran might have to review its foreign policy or nuclear policy, which means they would not hesitate from using nuclear weapons. And this has implications for not only regional security, but also the international security as well, right? Now, in this context, we also need to understand what is International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, this is a nuclear watchdog. It falls under United Nations. It serves as the primary international forum for scientific and technical cooperation in nuclear technology, and it promotes safe, secure, and peaceful use. It is located in Vienna, Austria. The key function of IAEA is to ensure that the nuclear technologies are used for peaceful purpose, which means the nuclear technologies should not be diverted to make nuclear weapons, and it is the responsibility of IAEA to ensure that all the countries abide by its treaty so that there should be no proliferation of nuclear weapons. It implements these safeguards, including monitoring and inspections, which means the officials of IAEA can visit any country and can inspect the nuclear facility to see if the countries are not violating the IAEA safeguards. So it ensures nuclear activities remain peaceful and not diverted for weaponization. Then what is NPT? Now this was an agreement that came in the year 1968. It's an agreement between nuclear states and non-nuclear states. Now who are the nuclear states? These 5 countries: USA, UK, France, China, Russia. Which means the NPT states that only these 5 countries are supposed to have nuclear weapons. Other countries are not allowed to have nuclear weapons. And India, it feels that the NPT treaty is discriminatory in nature because the NPT allows only 5 countries to have nuclear weapons. That's the reason India has not signed NPT. As India has not signed NPT, Pakistan has also not signed NPT. And then we also have Israel, who has not signed the NPT agreement, right? So once a country signs NPT, the country is making a promise to IAEA that we will not make nuclear weapons, right? Now, as I told you that once a country signs NPT, they are promising that they will not make nuclear weapons. But in return, IAEA promises these countries with the nuclear fuels that is important to generate nuclear energy. For example, NSG. In order to be a part of NSG, right, the countries have to sign NPT. Only once a country signs NPT, the country becomes a member of Nuclear Suppliers Group. And once you are a part of NSG, you can import the nuclear fuel required to develop nuclear energy. Again, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Again, in this article, you also need to know what is JCPOA. Now, what is JCPOA? This was an agreement signed in the year 2015 between Iran and the world powers. World powers includes US and 5 countries like UK, France, Germany, etc. The idea behind this agreement was to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. Now, Iran was hit with sanctions. There's an agreement between the Western countries and Iran. Iran promised that they'll not make nuclear weapons, and in return, the Western countries lifted the economic sanctions on Iran. But now, this JCPOA agreement was scrapped under the Donald Trump's presidency. Now, as this JCPOA is not functional, which means there are chances that in future, if Israel or the Western countries attack Iran, Iran would not hesitate using nuclear weapons, which means this not only threatens regional security, but also international security. So this is the article. I hope you understood the few key terms of the article. The next article that we shall be focusing is on the article named Rights and Wrongs. This article talks about the LGBTQ community, and with the challenges that the LGBTQ community is facing since a long time, it is important for us to understand this particular issue, the challenges that they face, and the steps taken by the government of India. So this can be mapped under GS Paper 2, Welfare Schemes for Vulnerable Sections. Again, a question can be expected of this nature: performance of welfare schemes that are implemented for the vulnerable sections. Now, LGBTQ falls under the vulnerable sections, right? Now, the government of India has formed a committee in order to look at the challenges that the LGBTQ community is facing. So, the committee is mandated to understand the challenges and propose solutions, recommendations, so that the government of India, with the help of the solutions or recommendations, can try to alleviate the pain and suffering that the LGBTQ are subjected to. Okay, so let's define what is LGBTQ. Now, LGBTQ is an acronym which encompasses spectrum of sexual orientation and gender identities beyond the heterosexual and the cisgender norms. Now, what is cisgender? Now, cisgender are those people who accept the identity, the gender identity that is assigned at birth, as opposed to the transgenders. So, L stands for lesbians. Now, lesbians are women who are romantically or sexually attracted to other women. Gays are those who are romantically or sexually attracted to the other men. Bisexuals, they're attracted to people of more than one gender. Transgenders refrain from accepting the identity, the gender identity assigned at birth, right? So, differs from the sex that they were assigned at birth. And queer is an umbrella term for those who do not identify with the traditional categories. Then again, others in the LGBTQ+, it includes intersex, asexual and pansexual individuals. The committee has been formed to mitigate, to reduce the discrimination or violence that the LGBTQ community is facing. Let us try to understand the legal stance in India. Now, students, until 2018, same-sex relationship was criminalized in our country, which means anyone who is in a same-sex relationship could have been arrested by the police until 2008. Why? Because in 2008, the Supreme Court came up with a landmark judgment which held that, or which the Supreme Court declared that Section 377, which criminalized same-sex relationship, now the Supreme Court declared Section 377 to be unconstitutional, which means it decriminalized same-sex relationship. Supreme Court in the year 2008 in the Nautaj Singh Johar versus Union of India verdict, right? But when it comes to giving legal recognition to the same-sex marriages, the Supreme Court refrained. Why? Because the Supreme Court said that it is the duty of the legislature to make laws to give legal recognition to the marriages of the same-sex couples. For example, the Supreme Court highlighted that under Articles 245 and 246, it is for the central government and the state government to enact marriage regulations offering various policy options under such as gender-neutral marriage laws, civil unions or domestic partnerships. The Supreme Court accepted or recognized the need for equal rights in areas such as ration cards, joint bank accounts and pensions, but the Supreme Court refrained from giving legal recognition to the marriages, right? Why? Because the Supreme Court said that it is not our job, it is the job of the legislature. So, which are the challenges faced by the LGBTQ community then? One is the social stigma and the discrimination. Now, there is a social stigma attached to the LGBTQ people. The society pursues or views them from a different angle. They are not given equal respect. They are ostracized. They are banished. They are discriminated, right? Again, legal ambiguities. There is no specific law or legislation that protects the rights of the LGBTQ community, which means, let's say, for example, if the LGBT community or the members of LGBTQ faces domestic violence or let's say sexual violence, there is no specific law meant for the protection of the LGBTQ community. Then again, family rejection and mental health. Now, when the family gets to know that their children have not accepted the identity assigned at birth or are behaving in a very different manner, they are ostracized, they are blamed, they are harassed. This also takes a toll on their mental health, mental well-being. This is the third challenge. Access barriers. Now, the LGBTQ community do not have access to healthcare facilities, employment opportunities, right? And that's the reason they are unable to live a meaningful and dignified life. So, these are some of the challenges faced by the LGBTQ community. Way forward, legal protection. It's very important that the central government or the state government has to come up with a legislation so as to protect the rights of the LGBTQ community so that they can live a dignified life. Education and awareness. Now, if the society has to change the perception of how they look at the LGBTQ community, then it is very important that the education and awareness, or the people need to be educated. The awareness has to be there among the people so that the society in large would accept this people as like the heterosexual people, and these people will not be subjected to any discrimination. Healthcare access. For example, transgenders. Now, transgenders who do not identify the gender assigned at birth would like to undergo a transformation or a surgery. For that, they need healthcare access. Unfortunately, because of lack of money, they are not able to access, or they fail to access the healthcare facilities. So, it is the duty of the government to ensure that the LGBTQ community should also have healthcare access. Representation, media and politics. Often the media and the politicians refrain from talking about the challenges that the LGBTQ community are facing. So, it is important that the media and the political representatives should talk about the LGBTQ community, their rights, the discrimination, the challenges they are facing, so that the people of the community can live a meaningful life. And supportive families. Again, the families need to be trained, psychological training need to be given to people who have faced discrimination. The parents need to understand how this is a natural phenomena. This is not something in trend, and that's the reason people are adopting to live such lifestyles. So the families need to be given training by the professional counselors, so that family to understand and accept their children. So in a nutshell, if our society has to be more inclusive, more equitable, then it is time for the government of India to also think about the LGBTQ community rights, so that India truly becomes an inclusive and equitable society as well as a just society. I hope you understood this particular topic. The next article is the activity-based curriculum drawn up for anganwadis. Now, few key terms that you need to know is Nav Chetana, National Education Policy, and this topic is important for your prelims. Now, a question again can be asked of this nature. Consider the following statements in relation to Janani Suraksha Yojana. These are the 4 statements, and you have to identify the correct statements, right? This was asked in the year 2023. Now, Nav Chetana, activity-based curriculum for Anganwadis. This can be important for your prelims. So, Nav Chetana is the name of the activity, right? This Nav Chetana is aligned with the National Education Policy 2020 and the National Framework for Early Child Stimulation 2024. So, this Nav Chetana activity emphasizes the critical importance of early childhood learning from birth up to the age of 3. So, from birth up to the age of 3, this is important for your prelims. So, which are the points that we need to understand with respect to this framework? Curriculum title is Nav Chetana, is in alignment with the National Education Policy. The framework, it emphasizes or it underscores the importance of early childhood learning, birth up to the age of 3. It outlines month by month activities. So, month by month activities need to be imparted to the children. This framework, right? The framework was formulated by a committee which had representatives from the Ministry of Women and Child Development, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and National Council for Educational Research and Training, right? About 14 lakh Anganwadi workers across the country will be trained, right? The central government is going to train the 14 lakh Anganwadi workers across the country. Now, the curriculum, right? The Nav Chetana curriculum includes engaging children in talking, playing, moving, listening to sounds and music. This will be done immediately once a child is born. It emphasizes sensory stimulation, which means the sighting and the touching, to help children reach various developmental milestones, and it can also help the children to understand the language early. Brain development. Now, this framework highlights that 75% of the brain development occurs up to the age of 3. That's the reason it emphasizes the importance of early childhood training. Which are the engagement techniques? It would include observing and responding to children's actions, using age-appropriate techniques, leading by following the child's interest. Then use of common household items. For example, it would include the usage of cups, bottles, fabric pieces for activities, making it accessible and easy to implement. So these are the various activities that the Anganwadi staff would be trained, and this Anganwadi staff would make the children engage in such activities. Developmental activities. It would include imitating sounds, spinning bangles, putting objects in and out of jar. Progressive skills. Now, activities also progress with age, from simple interactions to more complex tasks like scribbling with crayons, sorting shoes, and riding a cycle. Adaptability for developmental delays. Now, the framework also includes a curriculum based on the developmental delays. For example, the activities will be changed based on the developmental delays. For example, adapting activities for children who show developmental delays. So, for example, any children who is showing or exhibiting developmental delay, activities will be changed or adapted as per the needs of that particular child. So, this was the article. I hope you understood this particular article. Again, it is important to remember the curriculum name, that is Nav Chetana, right? Now, students, it's time to discuss few practice questions. Let's start. The first question is, consider the following statements with respect to South China Sea. Now, it is situated in the Western Pacific Ocean. Yes, it is correct. The Paracel Islands and Spratly Islands are located in South China Sea. Yes, these are the islands that China has disputes with the other Southeast Asian countries. It connects the East China Sea through the Taiwan Strait and the Philippine Sea via the Luzon Strait. Yes, even this statement is correct. That's the reason when it comes to international relations, mapping becomes extremely important, students. So, whenever you come across any key issue or let's say key term in the international relations, it is very important to mark that particular location in your atlas map, because mapping is very, very important. UPSC has this habit of asking questions based on maps, right? Which means all the three statements are correct. Option D has to be the right answer. The next question, consider the following statements about the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, first statement, it is recognized as the Atoms for Peace and Development, true, and is part of the United Nations. Yes, this one is correct. It primarily promotes scientific and technical cooperation in nuclear technology, correct, to ensure its use in weapon, wrong. It is against weaponization, so this statement is incorrect. IAEA implements safeguards including monitoring and inspections to ensure nuclear activities are exclusively peaceful. Yes. The purpose of IAEA is to ensure that the nuclear activities or the nuclear technology should be used for peaceful purpose, not for making weapons. Fourth, it supports comprehensive safeguards under NPT, correct, to promote nuclear weapons proliferation. No, the purpose is to prevent nuclear proliferation. So, this statement is incorrect, which means option 1 and 3. Yes, so option A has to be correct. Consider the following statements about the Nav Chetana curriculum under the National Framework of Early Child Stimulation 2024. The first, the curriculum is aligned with NEP 2020. Yes, we have discussed this, which advocates for a continuum of learning from early childhood, that is from birth until the age of 3. It is mandatory for all parents in India to follow the curriculum. No, it is not mandatory for all the parents. So, parents are not involved, which means parents will be trained, but it is not mandatory for all the parents, which means the Anganwadi staff and the ASHA workers would be trained under this Nav Chetana activity. So, which means only one, that is option A has to be the correct answer. Next question, the Supreme Court of India's 2008 Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India verdict decriminalized consensual same-sex relationship, overturning the section 377. Yes, this statement is correct. This is what we have discussed in the article. The Supreme Court ruling, while refraining from endorsing same-sex marriage constitutionally, emphasized legislature's responsibility to ensure protective measures for queer relationship. Yes, this is what we discussed while we are discussing the article, that the Supreme Court has held that section 377 is unconstitutional, but it has not given a legal recognition to the same-sex marriages, because the Supreme Court held that it is the responsibility of the legislature. Both the statements are correct. Now, a means practice question. Naxalism is a social, economic, developmental issue manifesting as a violent internal security threat. In this context, discuss the emerging issues and suggest multi-layered strategy to tackle the menace of Naxalism. So, first is the introduction part. Second is the body. In the body, you have to address how Naxalism is a socio-economic and developmental issue, and then you have to also explain the reasons behind the growth of Naxalism, and then you have to propose solutions, right? And then third part is conclusion. Introduction. Now, you have to explain what Naxalism is. Now, Naxalites are far left radical communists, right? Who are communists or who are the leftist ideologies? They believe that all the existing social relations are exploitative in nature and only a revolution through violent means can change the situation, right? Naxalites are the tribals who derive their inspiration or who derive their political ideology from the teachings of Mao Zedong, right? So this is what you have to mention in the introduction. You can also mention that the term was derived from a Naxalbari village in Darjeeling district of West Bengal, and the phenomena occurred for the first time in the year 1967. In the body, you have to highlight the reasons behind the spread of Naxalism. For example, we did discuss in the article that Naxalism is not merely a law and order issue. It is the failure of the government policies that has led to the spread of Naxalism. So you have to mention the reasons. For example, you can mention the political issues. For example, political issues, we did discuss that how the lack of civic liberties and the political rights pushed the youth towards the lure of extremist ideas. Then you can talk about the economic issues. For example, poverty, unemployment, lack of development have resulted in the feeling of hopelessness and deprivation. Then you can talk about the Jal Jungle Zameen issue, wherein we discuss two laws. One is the Forest Act of 1927 and the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. How these legislations, the modern legislations, took away the livelihood source from the tribals, and it was not met or replaced with the fruits of development, right? So these are some of the issues that you can highlight. Then what has the government of India done? The government of India has, then you can mention that government of India has banned the CPI Maoist under UAPA. The government of India has also deployed or helping the states affected by Naxalism or the left-wing extremism. For example, you can mention Operation Green Hunt in the year 2010, right? Massive security forces were deployed. Then you can talk about the multi-agency center. This center is responsible for sharing intelligence, right? Then we also discussed that the government of India is using both the hard diplomacy as well as soft diplomacy, right? So these are the solutions that you can mention, right? Then you can also mention the Roshni scheme, which is a placement linked skill incentive scheme. So these are some of the solutions that you can mention. And the conclusion, you can mention that Naxalism is not merely a law and order issue. It is because of the failure of governance that the Naxalism problem went out of control. So it is important for the government of India to ensure all the basic minimum facilities should be made accessible to the tribal people so that the tribal people would not fall prey to the hardcore Naxalites. So this is how you can conclude the answer. I hope students you got it. And that's it, students. So students, I hope you understood all the 5 topics from the Hindu and the Indian Express. At the same time, I hope you also understood the type of questions that can be asked in the examination. So students, if you want us to continue with our DNA, then please do like, share and subscribe our channel. Thank you so much.